Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ahmed Ouhnini. I am an economist at the Policy Center for the New South, which is a think tank, Moroccan think tank based in Rabat. And I will be moderating this session of the Developmentally Speaking initiative. Before we begin, I would like to thank, on behalf of the Policy Center, the World Bank Group, the United Nations Program for Development, the Atlas for Development NGO, for the organization of the 9th edition of this initiative that brings young people to debate and discuss some major issues of concerns in our region. I also thank ISEC Business School for hosting this event. Today's session theme is about water scarcity and sustainability in the Global South. And I have the pleasure to discuss it with 3 young panelists from the MENA region. Please note that this session is being recorded to be available for view in post-conference, and each panelist today will have a total of 5 minutes presentation, and we will hold most questions until the end of the session. For the audience watching us live, you can send us your questions through comments, and we will address them to our panelists later after we finish the discussion. Water remains the foundation of the economy, social stability, and food security in many countries of the Global South, and the water sector continues to grapple with major challenges in the region related to the depletion of water resources and growing demand and climate change. To explore these issues, let's please welcome our first panelist, Sir Hamza Shaham, who is the co-founder of Sowit startup, providing decision support systems to African farmers. He will join us virtually. If you are here, the floor is yours. We will wait for Sir Shaham to join us virtually. I think if our panelist is not here yet, we can move to the second one until we wait that he is here with us. I think that I will start with you, Sir Afaf. You are a colleague at the Policy Center for the New South. She's a researcher in economics, and her presentation will be about water stress in Morocco. So, dear Afaf, you have 5 minutes for your presentation. The floor is yours. I think that Sir Hamza will wait for us until Afaf finishes her presentation. It will be next. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ahmed, for your presentation. And I would also like to thank the World Bank and the UNDP and Atlas Foundation for the invitation. Since I'll be speaking first, and since we're here in Morocco, I would like to lay the ground for the other speakers, Mr. Tawfiq and Mr. Shaham, by tackling the issue of water scarcity in Morocco, which is known for being a climate change hotspot and is already in a situation that can be described as water stress or water scarcity. My contribution to today's discussion is based on a paper that is a collaboration with Mr. Ouhnini, the host of today's event, in a volume published in Springer book called Food Security and Climate Smart Systems, where we chose to tackle the issue of water, energy, food nexus in Morocco and how their management in a nexus approach and not in silos can lead to better sustainability results. The premise of our paper is that the consequences of climate change are already being felt in Morocco, given our geographic location, whether in the form of increase in temperature or a downward trend in precipitation, which can directly lead to water scarcity and, in turn, food security. Although we don't rely solely on national food production for our food supply, but we're later going to see how water scarcity can lead to spikes in food prices and how that can in turn influence affordability of food, especially for low-income households, and in turn how it can lead to a disruption of the socio-economic fabric of the country. So, as I said earlier, Morocco can be described as water scarce or in a situation of water insecurity because a country is considered to be in a water scarcity situation when water availability is less than 1,000 cubic meter per inhabitant per year. And in Morocco, the situation is very alarming since water availability is around 650 cubic meter per inhabitant per year. which is very low compared to numbers, for example, from the 1960s, where it was around 2,500. And this number is expected to decrease even lower by 2030 and reach 500 cubic meter per inhabitants per year, which is extremely alarming. So in our paper, we argue that water management has now become essential, if not existential, with the water conditions being no longer those that prevailed in the past and the demand being much more abundant than it was in the past. So now I'm going to lay some numbers on you, just for your knowledge. So water demand in Morocco today exceeds the quantity of the annual renewable freshwater resources. In terms of precipitation, we are witnessing rainfall patterns that can be described not only as in decline, but also as erratic and unpredictable. And when looking at the evolution of precipitation from the 1960s to today, or rather like 2 years ago, since our paper was published about 2 years ago, we can see that a rainfall pattern in decline of about minus 20% per year. Moreover, I don't know if you know, the Food and Agriculture Organization predicts that there will be a 13 to 30% decrease by 2030. And some other organizations or international studies argue that there will be an 80% drop in available water resources. Another important source of water in Morocco is groundwater. And we are already experiencing an annual deficit, which means that the withdrawals are already exceeding the natural recharge of those groundwater. And this annual deficit is around more than 800 million cubic meter per year on a country level. But this number varies from north to south and from basin to basin. This depletion is caused by two main factors. First of all, the overexploitation by the agricultural sector, which we will see later, is responsible for almost 90% of water withdrawals in Morocco. But also climate change-induced drought, which limits the natural recharge of those groundwater resources. And of course, the consequences of these exploitations are dire and can lead to drying up of water resources, the disappearance of oases, irreversible degradation of some ecosystems, the desertification, etc. Now to move on to the impact of water scarcity on food supply. So, as I said earlier, water withdrawals in Morocco are mainly destined towards agriculture, which draws up to 87% of available water resources, while industry and potable water are responsible for only 8% and 6% respectively. So it's very low compared to agriculture. And what makes agriculture already vulnerable to this decline in water resources is that in Morocco, agriculture depends heavily on rainfall. Because of the disproportionate volume that cereals occupy within the national agriculture, as they occupy 60% of land, of which 90% is located in dry areas. So in turn, dry years, they have severe impacts on overall agricultural output, and therefore which makes our agriculture not immune to climate change, and even irrigated crops are not immune to climate change.
Dear Afef, you only have 1 minute to finish your presentation.
I'm going to be done in a second. So to go back to my initial points, water insecurity is a threat to the socio-economic fabric of the country because according to the World Bank, political stability in low-income countries in general is synonymous to price stability and therefore food price stability. Otherwise, it can lead to social unrest and therefore socio-economic instability. I think I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Dear Afef, for these insights.
If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Afif is a colleague at the Policy Center, and we enjoy working together on issues related to energy transition and agricultural adaptation to climate change. Thank you for those insights. Actually, in Morocco, we're facing a serious threat when it comes to climate change effects over Moroccan the agricultural productivity, especially that Moroccan agricultural system is characterized with predominance of rain-fed agriculture that heavily relies on rain and the precipitations. We will now move on to the next presentation of Sir Hamza Rkha Shaham, who is the co-founder of Sowit startup. It provides decision support systems to African farmers. Please, the floor is yours.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Thank you. So thank you for the invitation and also for the introduction. So it actually is a company that provides information to farmers, but also to large organizations dealing with farmers. So information that serve, for example, for credit scoring purposes or index insurance and so on. And so it relies on a remote sensing technology, which is basically processing satellite imagery into data. So the input is satellite imagery, and every 3 days you have a satellite imagery that comes in, and then the algorithms enables to process this imagery into relevant data, such as, for example, leaf water content, that then helps farmers in irrigating the right amount of water the crops actually needs, and optimizing water and energy. Along the way, so it has been working in multiple African countries, serving more than 80,000 hectares, providing this solution to large-scale industrial producers as well as small-scale producers. And I would, note that indeed agriculture in Morocco, but in the African continent, is the main activity that is consuming water. And at the same time, one of the activity that is the less optimized in the way that resources are used without really taking into account on the conditions, whether these conditions are the availability of water at a certain area, the availability of the water at a certain time horizon, meaning depleting water but still irrigating in excess, or simply what the crop actually needs in order to grow the right way. We've been facing this challenge, especially in certain regions. When you take the Gharb region in Morocco, that tends to have a lot of water availability, farmers irrigating 8,000 metric cubes per hectare when they can irrigate 4,000. So the double, simply because it's gravity-fed irrigation and water is available through SBU, basin, or through dams, which is not acceptable, given that the Gharb itself has faced shrinkage in terms of rainfall. This year, for example, is one of the worst years recorded, with rainfall not going over 380 millimeters per year, with an average of the Gharb receiving between 600 and 700, and which really shows that there is no region in Morocco or even in the Maghreb countries that is, I would say, not exposed to this climate change issue and not exposed to the need to optimize on a daily basis natural resources, as farmers will at the end of the day choose between keeping farming or simply stopping the activity because of lack of availability of water. And this is already what we observed in Souss Massa regions, where many farmers, citrus farmers, have been discontinuing their activities because they cannot fulfill anymore the need of their crops, which actually not only destructure completely the social ecosystems that have been built around farming, but also create a lot of unemployment issues, as agriculture is the main provider of job opportunities in these regions. I would conclude by touching upon 2 points that are for us a challenge and at the same time an opportunity. The first is the fact that farming is by far the main, water-consuming activity in Morocco and in North Africa, but it's by far the less optimized and I would say the activity where natural resources are not really controlled, as we still have some farmers digging without authorizations, as we still have the government subsidizing irrigation systems where no water is available. So to what extent will we keep consuming water? And at the same time, we understand the government's position, because government has to sustain increasing rural activity, and rural activity cannot go without agriculture. So it's a dilemma. From one side, the availability, the lack of natural resources, and in the long run, probably a discontinuation of much of the activities that consume much water, so fruit trees, for example. And on the other side, taking an activity like citrus production that generates more than 20 million days of jobs every year. And we know that, for example, pruning or harvesting is also done by women labor. On the other hand, it's also about dealing with an activity that enables to provide opportunity in rural areas. And this is the question actually that matters today, is to what extent we can find a way in between building competitive rural areas that produce and actually export. A citrus could represent up to $500 million of currency for Morocco in the good years. And at the same time, having in mind that in the next 5 years, I believe certain areas around Oulad Barhil, Tarudant, Oulad Teima would not have enough water to sustain such activities. And it's already the case today. The second point is, I would say, about education. I believe that too many farmers and people believe more is better. More water is better, more fertilizer is better, but this is, I mean, of course, there are a lot of regions where farmers are educated, cautious about natural resources. I'm not generalizing, but there is still a dogma that if I put 7,000 metric cubes, it's going to be better than 6,000, which is definitely not the case, because in certain conditions, weather conditions, it actually encourages some diseases, some fungal diseases especially, that thrive in high humidity and high and hot temperatures. So there is an education issue, which is that we are not enough aware about less that could be better in certain way, and that would help farmers even finding an economic balance when they make money, because at the end of the day, more water is more pumping is more energy. 1 kilowatt is 1.2 dirhams today, and probably will evolve as we see how ONE is doing. So probably there is more education to do for farmers to find the right balance when dealing with their profit and loss every day.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for the work that your startup is doing in optimizing water resources for irrigation uses in the agricultural sector in Morocco. You have named some issues about the agricultural sector in our country. We know that it provides nearly 38% of the national employment and 74% of the rural employment in our country, which makes it a key growth driver and a provider for employment in Morocco. Thank you very much for these insights. We will now move on to the next presentation. We will move from Morocco to the Middle East and North Africa with the presentation of Sir Mohammed Tawfiq, who is joining us virtually from Egypt. He is a researcher in policy analysis, governance of water and resource recovery reuse. His presentation will be about water security in the MENA region and the role of non-conventional water in agricultural development. The floor is yours, Sir Tawfiq.
Thank you so much. I wonder if it's possible to share the screen from my side.
Yes, of course.
So just a couple of slides to help stating the...
We don't see the screen yet.
Yeah, can you give me the permission to...
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, now it does it. So thank you for the invitation. It's really interesting to see different contexts and how the Middle East and from the different regions in the Maghreb and Mashriq are suffering and trying to learn more about water scarcity and how to deal with it. So my talk today is briefly on the socioeconomic side of water scarcity and how this can change perception, risks, and benefits in different countries. I will focus on the Jordanian case, which is a very interesting case because Jordan is in the second driest country in the world, and they're suffering from severe water scarcity, where you can the waterfall in rainfall in Jordan ranges about 250 millimeters, the maximum 450 millimeters, and in some areas it's just below 100. The water share per capita in Jordan is decreasing in an alarming way. And of course, that also affects the agriculture sector, which is the largest employer in the country and also in many countries in the Middle East. So let's jump toward the summary, because going into the point directly, MENA is a water scarce country, water scarce region, but when we talk about water scarcity, we're not concerned a lot about domestic water supplies. But the major concern is the agriculture sector, which is the largest consumer and larger employer. Of course, this affects agriculture ambitions in the region, which also affects food security and stability in different aspects. So that in many cases lead to shift from one source to another and from one water quality to another, like shifting from fresh water to non-conventional water, to sustain the agriculture practice in many countries, including Jordan. And here also there's an important role for donor government interventions and other stakeholders, including farmers themselves. So as you see, Jordan has really water stress, water scarce condition that affects agriculture, where some farmers only irrigate every 14 days. And as you see, by time population increase, but the total renewable water sources is still the same. So we have really a big supply-demand gap in the country. That leads mainly to shifting in water quality, so shifting from fresh water to treated wastewater in agriculture, and reducing water rations, and delegating some management tools to grassroots institutions like water user associations. So the case in Jordan, that in northern Jordan Valley, which is, they call it the breadbasket for Jordan, now there is a big shift from fresh water for irrigation to treated wastewater. And this is for Jordan is very important because it will secure large volumes of fresh water for domestic users. But again, the question here is, what is the impact, or what are the impacts of using treated wastewater for long term on the agricultural practices, agricultural productivity? So this is not only the concern, but what about the farmers? What about the end users' acceptance, resistance to these plans? So what we have witnessed in northern Jordan Valley is considerable farmers' resistance to the plan, because they think that shifting from fresh water to treated wastewater means deterioration of soil quality, deterioration of agricultural productivity, and therefore deterioration to their income and livelihoods. So the question now, and this is very briefly about what we work in Jordan, is what is the future of agricultural practices under this shift from fresh water to treated wastewater? How this will affect the income of farmers, how this affect the future of agricultural production in the Middle East and North Africa. Thank you so much. I tried to keep with the 5 minutes, so thank you. I'm happy to receive your questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for taking in time. Thank you for presenting the situation in Jordan and the different infrastructure that are being put in place to increase water use efficiency and face water insecurity in the country. We will now move on to a session of question and responses. I will ask the audience if you have any questions that you may address to any of our panelists. We have 1 hour for this session. maybe less if the audience is a little bit too shy. I also recommend people that are watching us live on Facebook and YouTube channel to provide us with their question that we can address to our panelists currently. Thank you. Yeah? Can you please raise your hand, present yourself?
Thank you. My name is Hamza Al-Kharoubi. I'm from Morocco, and I want to really thank you for the three very short and to the point presentations. All the three of them were really completing each other. That's really informative, but to be honest, it's quite depressive, and that's something we should feel, because the situation, we use the word alarming, but this is terrifying to be more like, we're young, we really depend on the motivations and how we feel when we encounter such issues. So we are feeling terrified right now, because sooner or sooner, we will hear that those problems, the climate change is going to affect people's jobs. And because we know that, like you mentioned that, like you and Sir Hamza mentioned that basically we depend on agriculture, and we depend on the water, like for the economy depends on it, but not the economy like the broad definition of economy. But we're speaking about the villagers and the people who depend on water for a daily basis, and for like for the simple like economic activities that they practice. So to make this presentation or this discussion a little bit optimistic, do you recommend, like the three of you, if you may, any short-term recommendations for our governments or for us as civil society activists that we can really help, like reducing, we can say stopping, so at least reducing the damages that climate change or water, lack of water crisis affects. But I'm speaking like specifically like with the small villagers, the people who are really weak and poor, who cannot wait for the global organizations to come with very fascinating titles and big solutions. So I think the question is really clear, and I know it's not basically your expertise is the research, is not the recommendation of solutions, but it's going to be really helpful if you can give us your insights about the solutions our governments can do. And thank you so much.
So I don't know if we have a second question. We will gather all the questions, then we will address them to the panelists to reply. So the second question.
Thank you. So my name is Abdel Khagrinen. I'm from Morocco. I have a question related to fertilization. So as you may know that one of the most issues of climate change is soil degradation, and the massive utilization of fertilizers. To be clear, chemical fertilizers. It's let's say nefast for soil, and also nefast for when we say soil, we say climate change. So I think if you want to fight the climate change, we're not going to fight them by telling stories or something like that. But there is a huge side of the solutions is related to the economy. So economically speaking, if you have some ideas about developing some new product of fertilizers that's eco-friendly speaking, for example, there is some examples of some fertilizers based on the microorganism. So do you think there is a future of this industry, like fertilizers economically friendly? So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We will have to move to the next question. Can you please say your name and present your organization?
My name is Mariam Yassin, and I'm from Morocco. I would like first to thank you for your contribution and the very fruitful interventions. My question is the following: since we are currently facing an economical crisis when it comes to climate change and the issues we are facing today, I would love to briefly ask the question: and how can we, today's youth, as we are interested in climate change, more specifically water shortage or water scarcity, what are the solutions that can we, as contributors, do, or as today's youth do, in order to limit from these consequences of climate change in general? Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, please.
Thank you very much. So my name is William Makaza, and I would like to thank you for the wonderful presentation, all of you. So my question is in line with yesterday we were talking about desalination of water, and my understanding in terms of desalination of water is related to trying to purify this kind of water that we have to make it productive. So what are we also, as in relation to dealing with water scarcity here in Morocco, what are some of the ways that we are trying to manipulate, and how is the government intervention to have the win-win strategy? And I would like also to ask in terms of the taking into consideration of some institutes, why can we also take into consideration for the technology transfer in terms of awareness? I like the presentation from Mr. Hamza, and he mentioned like artificial intelligence, the way they are integrating it. So why can't we also try, because through that kind of algorithms that they are developing, sometimes we're talking of the big data in terms of, instead of like good data or quality data, why can't we also implement something related to technology transfer and institutionalize through our we have agricultural institutes. I know that here in Morocco we have got like IOV. That is another question. Then my last part is it goes back to the water scarcity issue again, where I do appreciate the role of INRA here in Morocco in terms of developing, like, for example, some new species, taking into consideration the crops that they're producing, like drought tolerant. Why, instead of wasting water, why can't we teach people how to do it, how to adopt those newly developed tolerant species? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have to mention that Sir Hamza Kha should leave us, so if you have any question to address for him, you can say to him directly the question. So we will take one or two more questions and we will stop there and try to answer them.
Yes, I'm Noor. My name is Noor. I'm from Morocco. What I want to ask is, we just saw that the main contributor to water scarcity was the agriculture sector. So why are most campaigns targeted towards the individual and how the individual contributes to it when the biggest problem is the agriculture sector?
Okay.
That would be my question.
Thank you. One last question, and we will move to responses.
Well, hello.
Hello.
I'm Iman Ben Omar from Morocco. So, as you know, there is no doubt that climate change is stressing the nexus, and also the impact on water scarcity is so dramatic. That's why we are using non-conventional water, and as they mentioned, desalination and wastewater reuse. So my question is, how can we make desalination and wastewater reuse more efficient and reliable and also sustainable? Because as you know, desalination has also many drawbacks, especially brine, because we don't know its discharges in ocean, and there is like classic conventional ways to discharge, like land use, or they can reject brine who is rejected directly to ocean. So my question is, how can we make desalination more sustainable and also wastewater reuse as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I will start with you, Sir Hamza Kha, if you want to answer one of the questions that have been asked by our audience, since you will leave us in a few minutes.
So thank you. Very insightful questions. Good that we have this level of discussion, and it shows the awareness level, at least at student organizations. I will just touch on 3 points to answer. There was a very interesting question. Why are we addressing individuals, whereas it comes for agriculture? I think it's related simply to what extent are farmers connected, to what extent do we have levers in order to create enough awareness at farmers level, and to what extent they do have the choice on a daily basis when they need to sustain themselves on a daily basis in order to afford day after day living. So it's easier to target, I would say, urban population that is more sensitive to certain speech that address someone for which it's not nice to have. It's just a must at a perception level to consume water. And indeed, all the desalination projects are not sustainable. Of course, they are addressing partly the equation, but they are just postponing the issue in the way that processing 1 meter cube of water requires between 7 kilowatts and 15 kilowatts, which is at current energy price 7 to 15 dirhams, whereas the farmer pays today water at less than 1 dirham. So who is this farmer that is going to pay 7 times to 15 times more for water, except maybe large-scale farmers exporting tomatoes to Europe? And to what extent the government would need to step in to, again, heavily subsidize, simply postponing the issue. And I'm not blaming the government, because they're doing an outstanding job in finding solutions in a very tricky environment where climate change is a global issue and where they are trying to conserve rural ecosystems with job opportunities delivered through farming. But there is no way Morocco could keep exporting its water in a country where simply a hectare of palm dates consume what 30 Moroccans do, and in a year basis. And I do believe that, of course, there are some innovations that could help. But again, these are not structural solutions. They will simply make Morocco earn time in dealing with the issue, reducing the consumption of water while keeping an economic balance. And these are very practical solutions. You have sensors that enable to know to what extent the water is irrigated and humid, and to what extent it can provide water to the crops. You have decision support tools, you have education programs, you have so many levers that could simply make the farmer save 10, 15, 20% of the water input, reduce the energy bill, and increase his or her margin while giving more time to Morocco to adapt to the new, I would say, order and the new situation in climate change. And last point, there are also certain crops that are more adapted to the Moroccan ecosystem. I mean, for example, you take the kharoub, or you take even olive trees to a certain extent, consume 3 times less than some other crops. So are we, in a certain way, Brazil, to afford to certain crops that consume 3 or 4 times more? Do we have the water availability in stocks of these countries to rely on it in order to develop? Probably the answer is around educating farmers that using less water is earning more money, and on the other side is having a renewed vision for Moroccan agriculture that is more sustainable, based on local markets, based on high added value in certain crops, and maybe less on exporting to the European market.
Thank you very much. We have another question about government options to mitigate climate change. Any of you, maybe half of you, would like to answer this question, please?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
First of all, I would like to thank you for all your questions and for being so enthusiastic and engaged with this topic. To start, I would like to answer Hamza's question about what are the short-term solutions that the civil society can engage in order to solve this problem. I would like to start with pointing to the fact that climate change is a structural issue in Morocco, which means that water scarcity is already structural and cannot be solved with short-term solutions. To go back to my speech where I said that 60% of useful agricultural land is dedicated to cereal crops, which is disproportionate because they only contribute to 60% of agricultural added value compared to the 60% of useful agricultural lands. And as I've said before, 90% of these lands are located in dry areas which suffer from water scarcity. And these crops rely on rain, so there's no way we can deal with that. That is why, for example, the government initiated some policies such as the dam and drip irrigation policies that have mobilized large-scale irrigation infrastructure and have promoted irrigated agriculture. Which have their share has moved from 5% to more than, I think, 20% in less than 15 years. And these kind of crops, we can use some types of solutions such as desalination, such as seawater desalination to provide them with irrigation water. And also we can use wastewater we can reuse wastewater, and we can also use solutions such as the ones provided by Mr. Rkha, such as the better management of water resources available.
We have also one question about how can we make desalination more sustainable? Do you have some any insights about that? Maybe the food, water, energy nexus?
Sure. Actually, one of the ways that Morocco has made desalination of seawater a little bit sustainable is using such plants that are powered by renewable energies, such as solar energy and wind energy. Because, as Mr. Hamza pointed to before, these are very energy-intensive plants. And so therefore, one of the ways to optimize them and make them more environmentally friendly is by using renewable sources of energy instead of fossil fuel energies to make les alimenter. You spoke about brine, which is also one of the major ways that they pollute the environment. The way to deal with that is with appropriate management of brine. Other than that, I cannot think of another solution.
Thank you very much. Dear Mohamed Tawfiq, if you want to share some insights or respond to any of the questions that has been addressed already. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for the questions. I think they're all relevant. I just reflect on a couple of questions that I could hear. First, on addressing the problem of villagers, villagers are not the target group that we need to help. But indeed, it's a value chain that brings us as communities with different professions from different backgrounds, with farmers. So we are all in this, not just farmers or other groups. So when we talk about this pessimistic kind of talks that we just gave, or at least me, that also, because that we're trying to highlight the problem, but of course there are solutions and more bright future if we start working now, as particularly with youth intervention. So among these solutions are virtual water trade, which is very important among countries. So virtual water trade enables water scarce countries to import its needs from water in the form of crops, goods, and so on. So others are smart agriculture practices like we had here in the other presentation. So smart agriculture practice can actually save a lot of water. In addition to smart agriculture practice, we need to look back at our traditional agriculture practices, which many of them actually saves a lot of water, including using natural-based solutions to improve soil quality, to increase productivity, increase crop withdrawal. This is the concept. Non-conventional water also plays a very important role, mainly desalination and treated wastewater reuse. So desalination now, the technology is improving, and also the cost per cubic meter to produce 1 cubic meter of desalinated water is reducing. So which opens a great potential for our countries. So many of the MENA region, or the Arab countries, have their own sea fronts. They can have access to salt water, which is a great opportunity. They are not the locked down countries. So, but the main thing that I want to highlight is the behavior change. It's if someone asks that what is the role of youth to help mitigating the impacts of the climate change, I would say that changing the behavior is very important. Reducing your water footprint is very important. Really thinking about what you consume is very important. So, for example, a country like Morocco or Jordan or Egypt, they cannot consume as the person in countries with rich in water, like many countries in Europe or the US. So this is not sustainable at all. This is my main reflections about two of the questions. I also want to add that we need to think, I would say it in Arabic, the takamul, which is integration, basin-wide planning, not just because water does not understand these political or administrative borders. So looking at a basin level will help us to have a better water resources management, rather than looking at a certain place or certain area, a certain village or a region. So this is very critical to understanding the water cycle and how we can optimize our practices and our management of water resources. And in some of the other countries in the MENA region, like in the Gulf countries, they started to thinking at the basin level. They started thinking in introducing new technologies in water resources management, understanding the concept of virtual water trade to reduce the supply-demand gap and reducing water stress, which has really significant impact on these countries. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. There were a number of important and interesting points raised in this event, and I thank our panelists for the different insights they have shared with us. There was only one question about fertilizer use that we didn't answer actually. Then I hope we will give an insight about it. In Morocco, I think that the future is in precise agriculture, and I think that the work that Hamza is already doing in providing farmers, and especially smallholder farmers, with imagery techniques to optimize water use and water irrigation, for example, is an important level. When it comes to fertilizer use in Morocco, and like in many other countries in the world, in the global south, farmers are not using soil analysis. So the governments are trying to push farmers to do soil analysis to have a clear image and idea about the needs of the soil when it comes to fertilizers and the kind of fertilizers that they need to put according to the kind of crops they want to harvest actually. So the question of making fertilizer sustainability is not only a level that we can address, but also about pushing farmers using soil analysis. The government in Morocco is trying to do so, and farmers are being more aware of this situation. We have outlined the use of renewable energies with desalination plants. In Morocco, we have a plant in Agadir that is being put in place for irrigation purposes. This is the first time that Morocco is establishing such big projects. It is capital intensive, we know it, but it's a solution actually to face water scarcity and at the same time find this arrangement to preserve Moroccan agricultural competitiveness and preserve the incomes of many farmers that are living only from their agricultural activities. I will stop there. Thank you for your presence, and I hope that I will see you again in another presentation in the next edition. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon, and thank you. We can take a picture all together. Yeah.
So thank you for this fruitful panel and session. So let's take the photo first. Yeah, yeah.
Here, over there,
Yes.
or just right there?
We can. Yes.
Recording